Welcome to the Mike White Podcast, where I, Mike White, share my conversations and book reviews through my journey to learn all that goes on in this amazing world. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Nothing on this podcast is financial advice. It's for educational and entertainment purposes only. With that, enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Mike White Podcast. This week, I am joined by my dad, Mike White Sr. He's a retired fighter pilot, baseball player, Airbnb superhost. He was the first guest on the podcast, so if you want to hear his story, tune into episode number 1. But this week, I'm visiting here in Florida with family, and my dad is a big Bitcoiner. We kind of went down the rabbit hole, parallel paths at the same time. So I want to document his story about Bitcoin, where he's at, what he thinks about it, and happy to have you on the podcast again, Dad.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so we'll start off just from the beginning of, do you remember when you first heard about Bitcoin and what was that?
I remember where I was. I was at Publix. I was working the night shift at Publix, stocking groceries from 10:45 at night till 7 in the morning. And it's you're by yourself on an aisle just listening to podcasts all night. It's a great job for that. And I was listening to some, and then you introduced me to the Investors podcast. And my boss was also talking about investing. I was thinking about investing, had a TD Ameritrade account and everything. And so I was kind of thinking, okay, I might as well learn about investing. And started listening to the Investors podcast and Preston Pysh. And I could, over the course of 2 years working at Publix, I could see him transform from his Warren Buffett style investing, which is still an awesome style. But you could see him just kind of slowly moving away from that and putting all his efforts into Bitcoin. And he's a smart guy. And everything he was saying was logical. And I kind of started watching what he was doing and listening to what he was doing. And then the Bitcoin 5 podcast with Michael Saylor that Preston Pysh had, when I listened to that, it all clicked. And it was one of those aha moments, light bulb moments, whatever the cliche is for something just hitting you hard. And that was it.
We'll definitely put that link in the show notes for people. But I remember from that podcast, that's the first time I heard inflation as a vector. Yes. And Michael Saylor going into exactly how difficult inflation is to quantify and how kind of messed up inflation is. Did you already have those thoughts of inflation, or did that just kind of click?
His explanation was more clarifying for me, but I've always understood inflation. I was an economics major at the academy, and I've studied economics my whole life, and I'm an Austrian economist, and I've studied George Mason and all the George Mason University, most of the economists there. I'm not super expert-ish, but definitely on a 1 to 10 of experts in the economy, I'm in the top half. So as far as economics. But so inflation was always almost a logical physical thing to me. If you're in a area, an enclosed container, and you have a certain amount of money and a certain amount of products and services, and then you just artificially put more money in there, the products and services, the prices must go up. It's almost like physics to me. And that's the way I felt it.
I see that too. I found that's a large hurdle for some people to overcome, and they think your money needs to be inflationary or else the economy won't function. I don't know if you have a good response for that, or how you deal with, because there's a lot of people out there like that. How would you respond to that?
It's almost like I really don't argue with much people. I don't persuade people that much. I mainly just mind my own business. But when you start arguing with people, 2 + 2 = 5, and they keep saying 2 + 2 = 5, it's hard to try to get them. It's hard to make them realize it's 4 if they think it's 5. But I can't argue with physics. I can't argue with reality if they think that it needs to be inflationary for the economy to function. It's almost like the person we heard about saying that we understand that Bitcoin can be shaved, or not shaved, excuse me. It can be, what's the word? Divided, yeah, by just 0.01, 0.001, keep putting the decimal point. And then the other guy that was arguing with us said, well, why don't we just add decimal points or add Bitcoin by just making more Bitcoin? And they don't understand that, no, there's no more Bitcoin. You can go backwards. You can go 0.0 and 0.001, but you can't go above 21 million.
Yeah. And that's the only argument where I give validity to, where people said you need you need to have more supply, because eventually if you had physical things, you physically cannot divide gold to a certain point. I mean, it's probably still would work because it'd be so small, and by that time, who knows what would be around. But Bitcoin, you can just go down to the zeros and keep dividing that way.
Yes, you can. And I don't think most hardcore Bitcoiners think it's going to be used. It's just the base layer store value is eventually it'll be the global reserve currency, and most people think that are hardcore Bitcoiners. So it doesn't need to be able to be cut down and transacted among individuals. It could be, you might have, 20 or 100 transactions per day among countries or among certain people, whatever it is, but it doesn't have to be that divided that many times per individual.
Yeah,
the layers do that.
Agree. And so you said Michael Saylor's podcast was big. You're there, you listen to podcasts at Publix. What other content or resources did you like in your learning journey so far?
Well, Preston, the Bitcoin or the Investors Podcast and the Bitcoin Podcast specific, where he changed it to the Bitcoin Podcast, he started having different people on as guests that had their own podcasts also. So through him was the root, and then I found all these other people like Larry Lepard. I found through Preston's, listened to him and just was agreeing with everything he was saying. Greg Foss, I was listening to him. And I think they talk to blue collar Bitcoin people, but that's another one I listen to. I know Preston's been on their podcast. I think they've been on his, but I know they're friends. But just all the people Preston had, and it's just like a tree and roots, and it grows out. You listen to one podcast, and then they have guests, and you like what they say. You listen to their podcasts, and then their books also. Saifedean, obviously the Bitcoin Standard.
Yeah, and I saw you just got Principles of Economics too.
Principles of Economics. I'm enjoying that. I'm looking forward to reading that slowly and just digesting every bit of that.
Yeah, and the effect you're talking about different podcasts is once you get on Twitter, you start following people on Twitter, and they're retweeting tweets they like, and you have this whole web, and all of a sudden now my whole Twitter feed is all Bitcoin.
Exactly.
All right, so you're there at Publix, you're learning about Bitcoin. Were there any big challenges or big kind of things you weren't so sure about that you were worried about Bitcoin?
I think I had all the standard worries that everybody still has when they're being introduced, like the government can stop it, the government will make it stop, and then also you can't hold it. There's nothing. It's vapor. Like I often consider the fiat currency vapor, but it's actually pieces of paper. But in my mind, it's vapor. Bitcoin is more real than the paper that the fiat is. But at the beginning, I was thinking that it's really nothing there. It's just it's computer code, and that is still computer code. But if people think it has value, then it has value. Anything we use as money, if people think it has value, then it has value. Value is always subjective to the individual.
Yeah. So the scarcity thing. Scarcity was a big part there.
Yeah.
Where the fiat is not. But why? How did you come to the conclusion that Bitcoin really is scarce, and that it can't be changed? And then you also said the government. Do you still have that government concern?
I believe that individuals doing game theory, individuals doing what's in their best interest, and once the network effect takes over, and all these sound like cliches, but they're not. I understand what I'm trying to say, but all these, it's just I like to use the analogy of an ocean coral reef. Once a coral reef starts building, and you don't know really what it's going to do, you just know it's going to be big and beautiful, and it's going to grow in the best way it knows how to grow. But nobody's telling the coral reef how to grow. The coral reef is just growing, and that's the way Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is going to grow based on the network effect, all these nodes. Nobody's going to be able to change and mold the coral reef exactly how they want to mold it. It's going to go how it goes.
Yeah, and I mean, people could fork Bitcoin, but Bitcoin as it is now is not going to go over 21 million. And I have, if BlackRock, even if they have a huge amount of Bitcoin in the future, and they decide, we want to fork to some proof of stake coin with an inflationary aspect to it.
It's not going to work. It could. But there's just too many people that are believing in individual sovereignty rather than being dictated by a central authority on how you need to spend your money.
Yeah.
So I think BlackRock can think they can do that, and I guess there's a small possibility, but I would bet on the other side that the world of individual freedom lovers will do what they want to do with Bitcoin, and BlackRock can try to join in and get the most, which they should. They ought to get the most value they can out of Bitcoin. But I think trying to control Bitcoin is not a good plan for anyone.
So with that, you could see that countries that control much of their own currencies, and the Federal Reserve, we can say it's separate, but I think it's very tightly linked to the U.S. government. If they can see that Bitcoin takes away from their control, provides more sovereignty and freedom to the people that just want to hold their value, why do you think they're not going to go and just stop it and say ban Bitcoin or something like that?
Yeah, I think there are going to be governments that try to ban Bitcoin. That's just bad judgment on those government leaders. They might. I mean, it's almost like North Korea right now. North Korea can do whatever they want, but I think most people would agree that North Korea is using bad judgment in their leadership policies.
Yeah. So how has Bitcoin changed your outlook on traditional finance or how you use your money yourself?
Yeah, it's just a peace of mind. It's similar. We didn't talk about this, but the YNAB, I know you're a big YNAB guy, and this is not a plug for YNAB. I don't get anything for talking about YNAB, but if you know, you know. If you're involved with the YNAB software, you need a budget. YNAB, Yankee, November, Alpha, Bravo, you need a budget. If you use that, then you have financial peace of mind already. So I've been using YNAB for 12 years, and once I started using it, I haven't worried about money since. And I'm not wealthy, but I never worried about money. And I know you used it a couple years after me, and you feel the same way. So I already had financial peace of mind just because I knew where my money was going, and I really felt like I had control of my money. Now I have an even next level peace of mind knowing that I'll get to keep what I earn without the bug of inflation stealing it from me. Bug is a light word, a nice word, without inflation stealing it from me. So I know it could take a long time. I know it could be even outside my life, but it's just peaceful knowing that I'm keeping what I earn.
And I think a lot of people push back on that of Bitcoin being an inflation hedge, because if you look in a year timeline, it's not, right? Depending on what kind of market we have. But I think James Lavish had on the podcast I got to interview him.
Awesome.
Yeah, I never heard this, whereas the dollar, and this is more for other currencies, they're volatile and on the way down. The dollar isn't volatile, but it is guaranteed to go down, and it could be volatile. I think we probably both think there could be an event where it goes down real fast.
Right.
Right. But as long as you know Bitcoin's volatile, but ultimately because it's scarce, it's volatile on the way up. If you use it as a savings tool, it makes a lot of sense, a long-term savings tool. And I still, what do you think about spending Bitcoin too? Do people? I think this is opinionated, but do you feel like you want to support the network by spending Bitcoin where you can?
I mean, I would like, yeah, I could support it, but it's not very important to me. That's not one of my high priorities in life, is to make sure I spend Bitcoin supporting the Bitcoin network. I'm not a joiner. I'm an individual. I'm an individualist, and I just make decisions the way I want to make, trading value for value in this world.
Yeah, I'm the same there, and I like seeing people that accept Bitcoin. So like Peony Lane, Ben Justman, if he can accept Bitcoin, then I set up my Strike account. Next order I'm going to do through Strike and Oshi and use those apps, and you get sats back, and it's fun and it's rewarding. But I also think it's just another aspect. It's not like a must do.
Yeah, I would almost say like I prefer giving them cash, and if they have a way to transfer that cash to their Bitcoin, then that's good. And it would be better if the Bitcoin started. I guess it would be better. I'm not sure if it was Bitcoin straight transactions, peer to peer, like it was eventually originally set up. But I'm in no rush to make that happen in my life. I'm just mainly using it as a store of value. So I'm definitely staying humble and stacking sats.
Yeah, it's another great resource, Odell.
Yeah, Marty Bent and Odell are great podcasts too.
Yeah, awesome. Well,
I wanted to talk more about the purchasing power, inflation, and the Bitcoin and being one Bitcoin. I had a guy texting me yesterday talking about what's your projection of price, and you don't project price. You can. It's a fun game to project how much Bitcoin will be. 6 months after the halving next year, you can do that. But still, any type of Bitcoin projection when you're projecting in dollars is really a fool's game, because you don't know even if Bitcoin is $150,000 next year. Who knows how much $150,000, what purchasing power that is. So the peace of mind is that one Bitcoin will always equal one Bitcoin. It doesn't not matter how much dollars it equates to at the current moment. I guess it does if you're about to spend it, but you know that one Bitcoin will always equal one Bitcoin. And you'll have one Bitcoin worth of purchasing power.
That's where I think I heard Odell talk about this, where he says how many cows can your Bitcoin get? Because that's a better measurement.
That's great.
Or eggs, yeah.
That's all I have.
Yeah, so thanks for coming on the podcast, talking some Bitcoin. Thank you for being like what do you call it? Not a punching bag, but to bounce ideas. Sounding board, yeah. It's really, if there's any just Bitcoiners out there that don't have a good community, or there's so many meetups, I would recommend people go and like meetup.com or wherever, go on Twitter, the Orange Pill app, wherever, find some Bitcoiners, because it's, if anything, it's just fun to talk about these ideas with people, because otherwise you feel like you're stuck in the fiat world all by yourself, and there's a lot of Bitcoiners out there.
Yes, Bitcoiners are kind of like marathoners. It's neat to hang around a bunch of marathoners. When you're over there, a bunch of people in shape. Bitcoin is a bunch of people who have good, smart, economic, financial freedom craniums and brains.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, see ya.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Mike White Podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Mike White Pod, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Y'all have a great day.